In recent years, Chinese military equipment has rapidly expanded across global markets. From South Asia to Latin America, from Africa to the Middle East, Chinese arms exports have filled the gap left by Western suppliers constrained by political conditions, export controls, and high costs. Beijing has positioned itself as the reliable supplier for nations seeking affordable, fast, and politically uncomplicated access to military hardware. Yet, as Chinese weapons increasingly encounter real operational environments rather than parade grounds and promotional videos, a troubling pattern is emerging. Operation Sindhur brought this pattern into sharp focus in South Asia. Before we move forward, please like, subscribe, and share Strategic Vanguard, and be up to date with the latest news and happenings from the world of defense and strategic affairs. Tune into our video channels in Rumble and YouTube. And if you want to hear the audio version, please tune into Strategic Vanguard Deep Dive in Spotify. Pakistani forces, operating a fleet heavily dominated by Chinese-origin platforms, encountered visible performance limitations across sensors, integration, responsiveness, and battlefield coordination. Almost simultaneously, reports emerging from Venezuela revealed similar operational challenges with Chinese military systems deployed in Latin American conditions. While the theaters differ geographically and politically, the pattern is strikingly consistent. Chinese export weapons demonstrate acceptable baseline capability, but struggle when subjected to real-world operational stress, complex integration requirements, and sustained operational tempo. This convergence invites a broader strategic question. Are these failures isolated incidents caused by local operational shortcomings, or do they reflect deeper structural limitations in China's export weapons ecosystem? Operation Sindhur was not a catastrophic military failure for Pakistan, but it exposed multiple vulnerabilities that had long been suspected by analysts. Sensor fusion challenges, delayed air defense responsiveness, and limited cross-platform interoperability constrained operational flexibility. These were not issues of individual crew competence or isolated technical malfunction. They reflected systemic design limitations inherent in the platforms themselves and the ecosystem supporting them. Many of Pakistan's frontline systems, from combat aircraft to air defense networks and armored platforms, originate from Chinese design or Chinese-derived upgrades. These systems were acquired primarily for affordability, availability, and political alignment, rather than technological superiority. On paper, the capability appears adequate. In operational reality, however, the absence of deep network integration, mature software architecture, and resilient electronic warfare protection becomes increasingly evident. Modern warfare is not platform-centric, it is system-centric. Victory depends not merely on the performance of a single aircraft or radar, but on how seamlessly sensors, shooters, command networks, and decision-making loops interact under pressure. Chinese export systems often lack this level of ecosystem maturity. They perform reasonably as standalone platforms, but struggle when integrated into complex, multi-domain operational environments. A similar story has quietly unfolded in Venezuela. Over the past decade, Caracas has invested heavily in Chinese military hardware, including air defense systems, armored vehicles, surveillance platforms, and command networks. These acquisitions were driven by Western sanctions, limited access to NATO suppliers, and political alignment with Beijing. Initially, the systems appeared cost-effective and politically convenient. However, operational feedback from Venezuelan deployments has highlighted recurring challenges. Maintenance cycles have proven inconsistent, spare parts supply chains fragile, software support slow, and system integration limited. Some platforms have reportedly suffered reliability issues in tropical operating conditions, while command network interoperability remains fragmented. These problems have constrained readiness levels and operational confidence. The Venezuelan case mirrors Pakistan's experience in several critical ways. Both countries acquired Chinese systems primarily due to affordability and political alignment. Both lack deep indigenous industrial ecosystems capable of sustaining and upgrading complex platforms independently. Both operate under financial or diplomatic constraints that limit supplier diversification. And in both cases, the real operational performance of Chinese systems has fallen short of expectations once exposed to sustained operational environments. This convergence suggests that the issue is not simply user error or localized operational shortcomings. It points towards structural characteristics of China's export defense model. Chinese weapons exports are optimized for scale, speed, and affordability. Beijing's defense industry prioritizes rapid production cycles, cost containment, and export flexibility. These systems are designed to be attractive to developing and sanctioned states seeking quick capability acquisition without political strings. However, this model inevitably involves trade-offs. High-end software refinement, long-term sustainment infrastructure, continuous upgrade cycles, and deep interoperability frameworks require time, institutional maturity, and sustained investment. These qualities are often sacrificed in export variants. Moreover, China does not export its most advanced systems. Export platforms are typically downgraded versions, both in hardware and software architecture. This ensures technological protection and preserves domestic superiority, but limits export customers' operational depth. As a result, buyers receive platforms that look modern but lack the layered resilience required for high-intensity conflict environments. Another structural issue lies in sustainment. Western defense ecosystems emphasize lifecycle management, predictive maintenance, modular upgrades, and extensive field support. Chinese export ecosystems remain more centralized and supplier-controlled. Spare parts availability, software updates, and technical troubleshooting often depend directly on Chinese industrial pipelines. When logistics chains are disrupted, operational readiness suffers rapidly. Both Pakistan and Venezuela have experienced this vulnerability in different forms. Interoperability presents yet another challenge. Many Chinese systems operate within proprietary digital ecosystems that do not easily integrate with Western origin or indigenous platforms. This limits the ability of mixed fleets to achieve seamless battlefield coordination. For militaries attempting gradual modernization rather than full ecosystem replacement, this becomes a major constraint. Yet despite these visible limitations, Pakistan and Venezuela continue to rely on Chinese weapons. This paradox reflects a deeper strategic trap faced by many mid-tier and financially constrained states. Economic reality is the first driver. Pakistan's fiscal condition severely limits its ability to procure Western systems that demand upfront capital, transparency, compliance, and long-term sustainment contracts. Venezuela, under sanctions and economic contraction, faces even more severe constraints. Chinese financing mechanisms, including deferred payments, soft credit lines, and politically shielded transactions, provide access where no alternatives exist. Political alignment reinforces this dependency. For both Islamabad and Caracas, China represents diplomatic protection, economic partnership, and strategic backing. Defense procurement becomes an extension of political alignment rather than a purely operational decision. Switching suppliers would carry political and economic consequences that outweigh technical dissatisfaction. Institutional lock-in further entrenches dependency. Training pipelines, doctrine development, maintenance infrastructure, and command architectures become tailored around Chinese systems. Once embedded, transitioning away becomes prohibitively expensive and operationally disruptive. Even if shortcomings are acknowledged, the cost of change exceeds the perceived benefit. This dynamic creates a dangerous illusion of capability. Platforms exist, numbers appear adequate, and deterrence narratives remain intact. But the underlying system lacks depth, resilience, and adaptability. In crisis scenarios, this gap becomes visible, not necessarily through dramatic collapse, but through constrained operational flexibility, slower decision cycles, and reduced escalation control. For China, this model remains strategically advantageous. Export customers become structurally dependent without achieving full autonomy. Beijing retains influence, market access, and geopolitical leverage while limiting technology diffusion. Pakistan and Venezuela serve as both markets and strategic extensions of Chinese influence. The broader implication is that Chinese weapons exports may face growing credibility challenges globally as more systems encounter real operational environments. The marketing narrative of affordability and parity may increasingly collide with operational reality. Nations considering Chinese systems must weigh not only acquisition cost, but long-term operational resilience, integration maturity, and strategic autonomy. Operation Sindhur and the Venezuelan experience are not isolated events. They are early indicators of a systemic pattern emerging across Chinese export ecosystems. The question is not whether Chinese weapons can function. They clearly can. The question is whether they can sustain high-performance operations across complex, contested environments over extended periods. For Pakistan, continued reliance on Chinese weapons reflects necessity rather than confidence. For Venezuela, it reflects isolation rather than preference. In both cases, strategic choice has gradually narrowed into strategic compulsion. In modern warfare, the greatest vulnerability is not technological inferiority alone. It is dependency. Dependency on supply chains you cannot control, software you cannot modify, ecosystems you cannot adapt, and political alignments you cannot escape. When weapons fail abroad, they expose not just technical weaknesses, but strategic fragility. The lessons from Pakistan and Venezuela converge into a single warning. Affordable weapons may deliver short-term capability, but long-term dependency carries strategic costs that are far harder to reverse than any battlefield setback.
Thank you for joining us on this Strategic Vanguard deep dive. If you found value in this analysis, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. We bring you fresh deep dives every Wednesday and Saturday here on YouTube and Rumble, and you can also catch the audio versions on Spotify and Amazon Music. Just search for Strategic Vanguard Deep Dive. For more insights, articles, and discussions, subscribe to our blog at strategicvanguard.com. Your support helps us grow and bring you more in-depth analysis on defense, geopolitics, and strategy. Until next time, stay informed, stay strategic.